Is the meltdown getting worse? Donald Trump now encouraging China to investigate Joe Biden. We're going to get into all of this right now. So far, Trump sticking in a one-man war room, providing almost no guidance for surrogates or a consistent message, minimal coordination with legal advisors. The idea that Trump alone can fix it is on display in a pair of rambling appearances.
The conversation was perfect. He couldn't carry his blank strap. I won't say it because they'll say it was so terrible to say. But that guy couldn't carry his blank strap. Perfect? I mean, perfect conversation. Just so you know, the call was perfect. Nancy Pelosi hands out subpoenas like, she has to approve it. She hands out subpoenas like they're cookies. You want a subpoena? Here you go, take them like they're cookies.
You know what it is? State of Mind, our recurring series with CEO of the Energy Project, Tony Schwartz, the author of The Way We Are Working Isn't Working, and co-author of The Art of the Deal. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with your opinion, which some people would call your bias. You have been waiting for this. You have been waiting to see Donald Trump on the run. Is he more on the run right now in this Ukraine scandal than any time we've seen him since he became president?
Well, I think the objective evidence is obvious that he is. I think what's really interesting is to observe a level of falling apart, that melting down, that is so far beyond what we've seen. And in his press conference yesterday, to watch him, especially in that moment where he was going back and forth with the Reuters reporter, and see that he actually moved from fight, which is his normal physiological place, to what I would call freeze, which is an extreme version of fight, where he literally was paralyzed and finally said, ask that guy a question, ask him a question.
That is fascinating, and you've worked with him, and you know him, you've studied him. What you're saying, I think, is so revealing in that moment. There's a whole debate in this country of, do you even interview the president anymore and some of his enablers and people who've admitted to lying? And yet I want to give a shout out. We do so much criticism in the media. Shout out to Reuters' Jeff Mason, who in that very exchange you talk about, he didn't lose his cool. He didn't get drawn into it. As you say, he held the line, which led to a moment of what you're calling the freeze. Let's take a look.
The question, sir, was what did you want President Zelensky to do about Vice President Biden and his son, Hunter?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, it was just a follow-up of what I just asked you, sir.
Listen, you ready? We have the president of Finland. Ask him a question. I've given you a long answer. Ask this gentleman a question. Don't be rude.
No, sir, I don't want to be rude. I just wanted you to have a chance to answer the question that I asked you.
I've answered everything. It's a whole hoax. And you know who's playing into the hoax? People like you.
I mean, that's an amazing moment. There's a piece out today called Unfit for Office. It's like a 10,000-word piece by George Conway, Kellyanne Conway's husband, about why Trump is unfit for office. It is, first of all, quite extraordinary. It's like a prosecution of Trump, but particularly around this idea that he's a fiduciary, that he has a responsibility to represent the country in this case, and he is putting his personal interest ahead of it. And that is in violent opposition to what the Constitution laid out. He also talks about the components of pathological narcissism. That's a psychological diagnosis. But his point is that it doesn't take a psychiatrist to recognize, as you just saw in that piece, that this is a man who is way, way out there. He's way off in the blue yonder. And to watch this is frightening, particularly because, Ari, it's going to get way worse. Because what's happened to him is, when you talk about narcissism, you're basically talking about a guy who is constantly trying to fill himself. I heard Peter talk about the idea of a black hole. Well, the black hole is really at base about his own sense of himself. There's an emptiness and there's a terror that's setting in that he's going to lose the legitimacy that the presidency gave him.
That's the other thing I was going to ask you. I've been wondering about this. I don't know the answer. What does it mean to you that the Mueller probe, which he triggered with his own brash firing of the FBI director, comes to its final denouement with Mueller's testimony, and the next day he does this. I mean, is that almost a political death wish?
I think Donald Trump is undeniably his own worst enemy. And I think that we see it play out all over and over again. And psychiatrists talk about the notion that when you are defensive, that the inevitable outcome of the defense is to pull upon yourself precisely what you were meant to be defending against. So he goes and doubles down on the very illegal act that he's done because he's in such a state of defensiveness and lack of good cognition that all he can do is attack. And that is evidence of what he does to himself every day. Every day. And that will get worse. It'll get worse for him, and it'll get worse for us. We are a long way from over in watching this unfold.
And it looks different, it feels different, and the president seems to know it's different. Tony Schwartz, always good to see you. Appreciate it.
Good to see you.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.